Now we're going to move on to lesson number 8, which is audio mixing in the Fairlight page. To do that, we're first going to go up to the Rough Cuts bin and double click on the 05 Fairlight Rough Cut to load it into the timeline viewer. You'll notice that it is very similar to what we've been working with, although just for demonstration purposes or learning purposes, we did split the dialogue kind of A-B, checkerboard it, as well as the sound effects. Music has stayed the same, but the sound effects and the dialogue have been checkerboarded just to give the appearance of more audio tracks so we can teach people how to work with more audio tracks. So to begin with, we really want to go into the Fairlight page, and you absolutely want to discuss the process of moving from editing into audio post. And obviously the catch is that to do it here inside of Resolve is just to click the Fairlight page, and now we have all of our tracks here in the Fairlight page. And to begin with, what you want to do is just give people a sense of the interface. What are they looking at? What are the different aspects of the interface, starting with the toolbar up the top where you can get the media pool, and you can open up a mixer, and you can open up meters. You have transport controls here. You have some toolbar underneath the transport controls. You have all of your tracks along the side here, and you have all of your tracks running across in the timeline. The difference being that a single track here, audio 1, inside of the Fairlight page shows you all the channels that are in that track, whereas on the edit page, it just showed you the single kind of container of that clip. But here you can see the number of channels, and if there were more channels, you'd see more kind of bars in there. So you want to just go over that and talk to people about how you can drag across. If you're selecting tracks, you can just hit the up and down arrow keys, and then the side to side arrow keys. Once a track is selected, we'll jump to the beginning and end of that track's clips. You also can work with your J, K, and L keys.
In this film, making a documentary about how the airplane breathe.
So a lot of the things do remain the same as they do inside of the edit page. Now, when obviously you would like to have a Decklink card or an Alto Studio box where you can see the video play out on a monitor. If you don't, however, you can open up the meters, and your video will be here in a little preview. To extract the video out, you don't have to have these meters open. You can come to the lower right hand corner and click the expand box to get a floating window for the video, and then you can close up the meters and the video will stay there. But if you do have a Decklink card and an Alto Studio, it will go out to a monitor. Okay, so let's now start dealing with some stuff. A lot of times what you will want to do inside of audio post application is when you have lots of tracks, audio 1, audio 2, audio 3 isn't really going to cut it. You want to be able to name these. So that's what we do first. We just come in and double click on audio 1, and this is narration, so I'm going to call this narration 01. Then we come down to audio 2, and this is narration 02. Sound effects is on audio 3, so we just type in SFX 01. Again, just so we can more easily see what is on each track rather than wondering what's audio 4 or something like that. So this is sound effects 02 on audio 4, and the last one is just music, one track of music right there. Naturally, you can have more tracks that you can build up, and naming them helps to keep yourself organized. You can also come in and you can color code them. So you can see here we have navy blue as our dialogue. We have one track of sound effects being lime green. So let's come over to sound effects 2, right click on it, change color. We're going to choose lime, and now those are lime green. So much like you can in the edit page, you can color code them here in the Fairlight page. And when you go back to the edit page, the color is back there too as well. So they're tied together. It's the same timeline. You're just looking at it differently. The next thing that we talk about is a spotting list, and we used kind of a spotting list in the last lesson when we talked about the edit index. And in the Fairlight page, you have your own index here, which helps you with the spotting list. So if we just click on the index button up in the interface toolbar, you'll get a tracks index, which shows you all the tracks. You also have a tab up at the top to click to markers, so you can see markers here if you want to do that, and you can view them as a list, and it will have the name of it. It also has a very handy little frame there. So if you came over and you added a new marker, you would get a new frame, a new marker there. So it's really handy in this index. You could just double click and go to it, and you can see here it says dip music under this narration. So we might want to come in and dip the music just like we did. You can see here there are keyframes from the edit page. We will want to dip it underneath this dialog right here. To do that, come over to the toolbar again, and you can use these sliders just like we had sliders that expand it horizontally in the interface on the edit page. You have it as well here in Fairlight, but you also have a vertical resize, really, so you can see the waveforms in there. Now, if we want to come over to our music track, which is way down the bottom here, as we scale this up, maybe we make it very big, you can see we eventually lose our music track in here. And if we want to adjust it based on this dialogue, we want to be able to see the music and the dialogue in the timeline kind of next to each other. So that's really what this track index is for. The track index shows you all of your tracks that you have, and it has little eye icons where you can show and hide the different tracks. So if we wanted to put the music next to the narration, I can just hide my sound effects track, and now in the timeline I have my music next to my narration, making it much easier to dip it underneath this narration. These aren't muted tracks. These sound effects, you can still hear them as you play, but they are not visible in the timeline. So right now, if we want to just come back and dip our music here, maybe we want to start dipping the music right here. It works the same exact way as it did on the edit page. You just option click or alt click to add a point, alt click again to add another point, and then you can just start dragging these points down to make it quieter or drag them up to make them louder. Give myself a little bit more room here. And we'd do the same thing at the end. We would alt click here and maybe another one here. Of course, you have an inspector, and in the inspector, if we select our track, you can see we have volume, so we can go to the next keyframe, and if we wanted to raise it up there, we can raise it up there, lower it there. And so you can use the inspector to jump between these keyframes and raise it and lower it to whatever you like. And once we are done doing that, we would turn back on our sound effects tracks, and we might decide to Shift Z to see the entire timeline and just shrink them down a little bit to be able to see all of our dialogue, sound effects, and music track as well. Okay, the next thing that we discuss is busing and creating submixes. And this is a really important critical feature inside of Fairlight. And it's basically busing or submixing is the ability to take multiple tracks and kind of group them together into a submix or a bus, which is then controlled by one fader in the mixer. So what we're going to do is open up our meters, and I'm going to close our video. And if you want to get rid of your video so that it's back inside of the meters, you can just click in the upper right hand corner, and there it is. And you can see all of our tracks here have faders associated with them. Audio 1, Audio 2, you can see the names down here as well. You can see they're color coded. So it's very easy to see the color coding that matches the tracks. It also matches the meter color coding up the top. So it's very easy at a glance to see exactly the tracks that you're dealing with. Here we have all of our individual tracks plus a master, right? And here we have all of our individual tracks as meters and a master. And what we're going to do is create a submix for the narration and a submix for the sound effects, so we can control them now using just one fader. And to begin doing that, go up to the Fairlight menu, and you come to where it says bus format. And that's the first step that you do. You come in and you choose bus format. And what that's going to let you do is actually kind of create the container or create the bus. And then later you'll be able to assign the different tracks that belong into that bus. But to begin with, you just create the submix or the bus. To do that, we're going to create a submix. You can create a different main or an auxiliary if you want to, but we're going to create a submix. And we're going to click on it. Now this submix with the username, what I want this to say is that this is narration. So I'm just going to say NARR, 01. And it is a stereo track. And its color, I'm going to say, I want it to stick to being navy. We're going to create another submix. This is going to be my sound effects. And it is also stereo, but you can see you can make it a 7-1, 5-1, just the left, center, and right if you want it to be a mono track. It can be any of these, which is really nice because you can basically have a separate group of faders or faders that are submixes that control just, let's say, the surround sound mix. Or in some cases you could say that a fader will contain, or a submix will contain, different languages. If you want to create different languages for distribution to different countries, you can do that all in one project, which is very unique. But this is going to be just a simple stereo mix. So now we have our two submixes, and you'll notice that once we created these, up in your meters, you also have S1 and S2, the two submixes we just created. I'll make this color of this submix yellow so it stands out more. You can see it's yellow now in the meters. You also have it over here in the mixer as well. Submix 1, submix 2, and they have the colors associated with it. So once we've done that, we can say, okay, we're done with creating the submixes or the buses. Now what we need to do is assign what tracks are into each one of those. So you go back up to the Fairlight menu and you say bus assign. Now this opens up the bus assign window, and we're going to choose from the buses up the top, and then all the tracks that we can assign to those buses are located down in the lower half of the screen. So to begin with, we'll choose B1, this bus 1 narration. And I want my narration 1 and 2, just click on them, to be assigned to this submix or this bus. And you can see now on the available tracks, this narration 01 track is in master 1 and bus 1. This narration 2 is in master 1, which is right here, your main, and bus 1, right? If I want to go to bus 2 and put tracks in that, I'm going to put my two sound effects. And you can see these now have B2s on them to say that they belong to this submix. Now, once they go to a submix, the submixes go out to the main. So these individual tracks here don't have to go out to your main or your master fader if they're already in a submix, which is going, that's kind of redundant. So what I'm going to do is click main and then turn off the individual tracks, all except music. Music doesn't have a submix, right? We didn't create one for music. So I'm going to leave that the way it is and only remove my sound effects tracks and my narration from the main. Because you can see down the bottom, this narration 01 submix goes out to master 1, and this sound effects submix goes out to master 1, right? So it's just like a big loop. These are going to the submixes, and then these are going to the mains. Now you're all set, and your submixes will control the multiple tracks that are assigned in them. So we'll just click on save, and now what we can do is start at the beginning of this if we want to, and we can hit play. And just as a matter of making sure it's all working, we can come over to our dialogue submix in the faders, and you can see I hear nothing.
And shoot the real world.
Right? And then we'll have our sound effects.
It was possible to shoot it. We wanted
Just playing around with it to get a feel for the submixes and the main.
get the shot, and the weather wasn't right. We either go back to that location or to make a movie.
And maybe that music is a little loud, so we might want to come to the music track over here and dip that down a little bit.
Important. Every shot was original, and then everything was real.
Right? So they were able to now mix those. But as you can tell, like we discussed in the previous chapter where we said a target, maybe your dialogue, your narration is around -12, somewhere around there. Where do you target the final mix? Where should that be targeted? And that really has to do with new meters called loudness meters. Now you may be asking yourself, why do we even need another set of meters for audio? But the problem is that when you watch television, you notice that the differences in levels, in audio levels, when you flip between channels or programs change, or the difference between programs and commercials, they're all over the place. And you generally have to use the volume on your television to lower the commercials or increase the programs and what have you. Now, those differences aren't easy to measure using these traditional RMS meters that we have on the edit page. So if you can't measure them, you can't master them, right? There's no way to say what the loudness is if you can't measure them. And that's the reason why you need a new set of meters called loudness meters. Well, these are not decibels. We're not talking about decibels here. Loudness meters use what's called a loudness unit, because peak meters or RMS meters don't really give you enough information about the overall loudness of the entire program. They are meant to give you kind of a momentary loudness or a peak at a certain point, but they're not telling you how loud the overall program is. And that's what loudness meters are designed to do. It's kind of giving you an average program's loudness, and they give you a target to hit. What is the target you're supposed to hit for loudness? That depends on the region that you're in. In a broadcast situation, you'll want to target either -23 loudness units or -24 loudness units. And those are loudness units full scale. You'll often hear LUFS, loudness units full scale. But generally, they're going to be -23 or -24. Now, if you look at the actual loudness meters, though, those are going from +9 to -18 at the bottom here. 0 is the normalized point for your target. So whatever region you're in, on the meter you're trying to hit 0. Now that 0 may mean -23 or -24, and you set that in your project settings. Now how does this whole thing work? You go to the very beginning of your timeline, and you hit reset, and that resets all of these meters. Now, over here on the left, this meter is kind of your momentary. It's kind of a very short, brief momentary loudness. And over on the right, this is more of your kind of short range 3-second loudness. So you have a short, which is your 3 seconds. You have the maximum loudness that these are. You have the dynamic range, what's the difference between the softest point and the loudest point. But really the most important display to pay attention to when determining the loudness is the integrated number down here in the lower right of the meters. That is showing you the overall average loudness of your program. So you have to play the program, play through it. It will give you a readout of the total average or integrated loudness, and that's what you're targeting. So what I'm going to do to begin evaluating my loudness, especially my integrated loudness level, is I'm going to move to the beginning of my timeline, click the start button, and then hit play. And now it's evaluating the loudness, and you really want this integrated number to be right around 0 as you play through the entire thing. And you can see I'm getting my short and my maximum, and you can see what you would think is that this is fairly low. I can go a little bit louder, but the music does come in a little bit louder later, so we'll wait and see how that changes the average. So you just play through your timeline and you watch this integrated level. Now you can, if you think we've kind of passed the loudest points, you can stop it. And you can say, well, we could go a little bit louder, so I'll come to my main and maybe boost it up just a little bit. And then you have to click reset, come back to the beginning, hit start, and hit play, and now see how that has changed your integrated level.
It was really important to go out and shoot the real
So that, when it's yellow, you can see we're in a good range there. And we'll see how it changes as we play through it.
If it was possible to shoot it, we wanted to go shoot it.
We're looking
Couldn't
pretty
get the
good.
shot or the weather wasn't right.
And now you
go
can
back to
see
that
we're a little bit
location to
loud.
make the movie.
We're too loud. This wouldn't pass quality control since it's above the target.
It was really important. Every shot was original and that everything was real.
And then you can see at the end, the overall loudness, the average, the integrated loudness is 0.3, which is perfect for falling whatever we're set to, -23 or -24. Now, if we don't reset it, it's going to be cumulative, right? So if I start again, it's going to be cumulative. If I start in the middle, it's just going to pick up there. So you always want to remember to start a new reading. You definitely want to reset it and then go back to the beginning and play it again. So that's basically how you use those loudness meters. It's really a mastering type of meter. When you're ready to output, you want to make sure the levels, the overall sound is correct and as loud as it can be, but not over. So that's what these loudness units are. Fairlight page, we also do come in and we expand this a little bit horizontally, and we do come down and show that this fade that we added to the music in the edit page is also here in the Fairlight page. You can change kind of the power of it by using this middle control point to change the power of it. But all of the things that you do inside of the edit page for audio are here, including the fade up and including any of the keyframes that you've added as well. And that's as deep as we go inside of this Fairlight page. And the most important thing I think you want to focus on is the index, the busing, and then of course the loudness meters. Those are the three key points that you want people to take away from using the Fairlight page.